Go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Laura Ehrlich, and our guest tonight is Tara Laskowski. So before I introduce Tara, thank you all for joining me tonight. If you are so inclined, please consider becoming a patron or patroness of Writer Mother Monster to help me keep this podcast going. And without further ado, Tara Laskowski's debut suspense novel, One Night Gone, won the Agatha Award, Macavity Award, and the Anthony Award. Her second novel, The Mother Next Door, will be published in October 2021, so just a couple weeks. She also wrote 2 short story collections, Modern Manners for Your Inner Demons and Bystanders. She has won the Agatha Award and Thriller Award for her short fiction and was the longtime editor of the online flash fiction journal SmokeLong Quarterly. A graduate of Susquehanna University and George Mason University, Tara grew up in Pennsylvania and lives in Virginia, where she has one son who is 9 and describes writer motherhood in 3 words/4 words as learning to be efficient. Now, please join me in welcoming Tara. Hi, Tara.
Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for joining me. I'm excited. I feel like we've crossed paths so many times in the last couple of years, and it's great to finally meet face to face.
I know. We published you at SmokeLong, right?
You did,
that was our
yes.
Kind of intro.
I think it was. And SmokeLong is just the best publication. Well, I want to start with motherhood, but first just tell us how you got involved in SmokeLong Quarterly, which is, if anyone doesn't know, an amazing flash fiction publication.
Yeah, so I actually won their fellowship in, 2009, I think it was, I won. And it was at one of those times where I had just graduated from my MFA program, and I didn't really know what I was doing as a writer. I was trying to write a novel, but it wasn't going anywhere. And I felt like I'd lost my fun, in terms of writing. And so I saw the call for the flash fiction fellowship, and I was like, I have some prose poems that could kind of fit in this arena. And so I just submitted on a whim, and I won it. And I got to spend the whole year writing flash fiction, and it was so fun and super experimental, and just I feel like I found my fun again. And then at the end of my term, the longtime editor had wanted to step down, and it seemed like SmokeLong might actually gone away. And I was like, I don't want it to go away. I'll take over. So I got to edit it. And I ended up being the editor for about 10 years, almost 11 years. It was so fun. I kind of miss it.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. It's such a great publication. And I want to talk about prose poetry and finding your fun and all of these things in just a second. But first, tell us about those 3.5 words that you used to describe writer motherhood. And again, those were learning to be efficient.
Yeah. So when you asked me that question, I was trying to think about because my son's almost 10. So it's been a while now that I've been a mom, and I was trying to think about what, I don't know anymore, but really to me, it's all about time. And having enough time and never having enough time. And so I think for me, the learning to be efficient, even though it's technically 4 words, is really what it is. It's all about, I have 15 minutes right now. What can I do to be productive? And I have learned that I have to sit down and I have to start writing immediately, because I never know when I'm going to be interrupted or when something's going to come up, or, I only have this amount of time to do it. And so that is a huge thing for me, is just learning how, because I always felt like writing was this very artistic, you have to find your muse, and you have to, the inspiration has to come. And if that happened, I would never write anything. So it really is about sitting down, getting it out, whatever it is. If it's bad, that's fine. You can fix it later, but it's always better to have something on the page than to have nothing. So I think that's sort of hit the core of what it is for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard that from so many other mothers on the show, that, and I was the same way, before having a child, where it felt a little more flexible. Like I could sit down and kind of, think for a while and journal, and then I could come back to it later if I wasn't feeling inspired or whatever. But now you're right. It's like you sit down, you're like, this is the time I've carved out and I need to put my head down and work. And I feel like that sounds kind of painful, but in reality, it's kind of freeing, or at least I find it freeing to be like, this is my time and I'm going to claim it.
Yes. And freeing, I think, is a great word for it, because I think it's freeing if you can say to yourself, it can be bad, because then it's like, I'm putting in the time, and if I'm not completely inspired, that's okay, right? And usually it's not as bad as you think it is. But it really is just getting over that barrier of, oh, I'm not in the mood, or, oh, I'm not feeling creative. It's like, well, you kind of have to, especially when you're writing a novel. Like I am totally, I don't know, my whole perspective on writing has changed since I started writing novels, because flash fiction is a lot different. I think the writing process for me is a lot different when I'm writing something short as opposed to writing something longer.
Oh, can you talk about that a little bit? What is that difference?
Yeah, so I've always been kind of a short fiction writer, and so transitioning to writing novels was really tough for me, because I like to be able to see the entire story, either in my head or on the page. And to go from writing stories that were sometimes like a paragraph or two, or up to like 1 or 2 pages, to writing a 300-page novel is like, so it was very stressful for me to try to write a novel, because I just couldn't see the whole story. And I had to really learn, like I had to really teach myself that that's okay. That, you can't possibly have a 300-page story in your head the whole time. You just can't. You can't do that. And so once I kind of learned that, I think I got a little bit better at it. But it does help to write every day, or like at least check in with your story every day when you're working on something longer, because it does, I think, help to refresh your mind a little bit, and just, I don't know. I think that I was always kind of like, I'm not the person who can write every day, whatever, that advice sucks. But then when I started writing novels, I was like, okay, I see the value in this. And I think it has really helped a lot to at least check in, or at least think about it. And I think that, especially for moms, or at least since I started being a mom, especially when my son was really young, don't underestimate the power of thinking, because if you're sitting there and you're doing something else and you can't immediately be at a keyboard or computer to write it down, the thought process is still very valuable, I think. So.
Yeah. And actually, I remember Katie Gutierrez, who was on a few months back now, maybe even a year ago, said something similar, and she had a very small baby at the time, and she said that she had to kind of reevaluate what it meant to write. And for her, sometimes it meant, and she said the same thing about touching her work every day, even if it was reading something tangential to it, or thinking about it, or writing one sentence, just to keep it kind of fresh. So yeah, that's really good advice. Can you talk a little bit more about, so if it's, and I feel you on this, because I also, as you know, and said earlier, write flash fiction, and then went to a novel, and it is this kind of a painful and weird process. But can you talk about, so if it's impossible to keep the 300-word story in your head at any one time, what strategies did you use to get back into the work each time, if you couldn't go back and just reread the 300 pages first?
No, I don't know. I mean, once I feel like I've said this before, that I feel like when I'm working on a novel, it's like I have to take a really deep breath, and then I have to just submerge, and like that's it, right? And once I start working on it, I'm done. Like I can't work on a short story. I can't work on, like, I just have to keep that book in my head, and that's like the thing I'm doing. So I will like maybe have an idea for a short story and I'll just jot it down and hope that, I'll be like, please just stay there. And when I can get to you, I'll get to you. And sometimes it goes away and I like, I can't do it, but sometimes I can go back to them. But I do like, I've decided like, this is it. I'm working on this book and it's going to take me a long time, but like, this is my focus because being a mom, having a full-time job, having, some semblance of other life, like passions or, wanting to watch a TV show every once in a while, I only have so much time. And so like, this is the project that I'm devoting it to. And so that helps, like just being able to say to myself, like, you don't have to worry about writing a short story right now or, thinking of another novel idea or something. Like, you just focus on this, which helps a little bit. It also helps for me, I think, to have notebooks everywhere. Like, and so if something comes to me, I can jot down an idea. I have been known to walk around my neighborhood and like speak into the recording phone thing. Like,
I do that too. Yeah.
I'm like the crazy woman who's like, oh, she, whatever. But yeah, so those little things I think help. Like, and my husband's also a writer. And we call it novel head, where like we're walking around and we're very clearly like totally somewhere else. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you just said because I have novel head right now. And we like, get that. Yeah.
Oh, it's great that you can both sort of know what that state of mind is, because it's hard to explain to people, isn't it? Like that deep focus inward on a project. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a strange thing, isn't it? Like we just walk around and like invent people and it's very weird.
It totally is. It's true. Talk us through the timeline of motherhood and how it coincides with your writing career. So your son is 9 now, and you were the editor of SmokeLong Quarterly for 10 years, and you've been writing. Obviously, you've published a number of books. So tell us, like, when did you start writing books? When was your son born in that process? How did that all work together?
So my first book, which was like a little tiny short story collection called Modern Manners for Your Inner Demons, that was published when Dash was 10 months old. And I remember he was at my book launch and he was like getting ready to walk. And I have a picture of my dad like holding him, like holding his hands up like at the book launch, like as he's like getting ready to walk. And I do remember very distinctly thinking like, okay, this is awesome. I had a child and now I have a book. Like, because there is, I think, that fear of, am I ever going to be able to do anything ever again?
Yes, yeah.
And so I remember like feeling that accomplishment of like, wow, like, okay, I did this, And so that was my first. And then I had another short story collection published. What is like 3 or 4 years later, maybe. And then my novel came out in 2019. My first novel came out in 2019. So I have basically been like publishing book length work since I've had my son. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I was always afraid that motherhood would mean the end of writing, and that's something we talk about a lot, obviously, on this show. So the first book that came out when he was 10 months old, were the stories written primarily before he was born for that collection?
I'm trying to remember. I think some of them were, but not all of them, because that book was it's called I call it my dark etiquette book. So I started writing these flash fictions that were kind of etiquette guides on things that people would never have etiquette guides on, like the etiquette of arson and the etiquette of homicide and that sort of stuff. And they were really fun. Like I wrote the first one, which was the etiquette of adultery. And I didn't have any intention on like, any kind of story collection or anything at that point. I just I wrote that title down one day and I was like, that's a really fun title. I want to write a story about this. And then And then from there, it was such a fun story to write that I was like, maybe I could do another one, you know? And and then that turned into a series. So I think, you know, by the time I decided like, okay, I'm going to try to make this a collection, I'd already had Dash. And so I had to write a few in order to kind of flesh out this collection. I had maybe like 4 or 5 of them, and I knew I needed more than that if I was going to try to publish it in some sort of chapbook form. So I definitely was rating some of them, but I already maybe had the idea by then. I'm not sure. I don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah, I love the concept. That's amazing. Do you remember at all how the writing changed before and after he was born in that particular collection? Or did
no, I don't. I mean, I remember worrying, like I do remember thinking that I could only write flash fiction at that point because it was smaller and it was, you know, not that flash fiction is easier to write, because I think in some ways a lot harder to write good flash fiction, but that again, it's that focus of like, I could see this on the page. And so in my bursts of, see, I'm also a person who does not do well with like little sleep or no sleep. And so like the first year or so of Dash's life, like I was not.
No, those are lost years. Yeah.
Well. So that was really all I could manage. And I was like, that's okay. That is fine. Even if I write one flash fiction during his first year, at least I'm still writing, you know? But no, I don't know that the subject matter really changed. It was more just the time and, you know, having to give yourself some grace. So, yeah.
And speaking of giving yourself grace, because I do want to get, I don't think I've held it up yet, but to the new book that's coming out in less than 2 weeks.
Less
than 2 weeks, The Mother Next Door. And we'll go back and talk about previous work as well. But this book you wrote during a pandemic.
Yes. And it was the worst experience.
Tell me about that. Start there. Why was it hard to write?
Well, okay. So I had written my first novel just, you know, I had written 2 short story collections, and I was like, you know, I kind of want to try a novel. I don't know if it's going to work. But I wanted to try it because I felt like it was like, I don't know. I felt like people write novels, right? Like it's hard to make a living as a writer. It's hard to make a living as a writer, whatever. But if you want to make any kind of money at all, or, you know, have any sort of distribution, like, I don't know. I don't agree with this, but I do think, you know, you got to try a novel. So I was like, I'll try a novel. And if it doesn't go anywhere, that's fine. And so I wrote this book, and I, you know, didn't have a deadline. No one wanted it. You know, it was just, I was just writing it. And then it sold, and I sold the second novel on proposal. I hadn't written a word of it. I had just outlined the whole thing with my editor. And so they bought it with this outline. And I had thought, okay, I have this outline. This is the book they want. I've already figured out all of the plot points. This is going to be so great. Like, I could just write this really fast, get a draft out, have months to revise it and make it great. And it's going to be wonderful. And all of my writer friends had told me that the second novel is the worst because it's the first time you're writing on a deadline. You've got this pressure from your first one and all the stuff. And I was like, okay, it's going to be hard. But I had no idea just like how hard it was going to be. And so I wrote the whole book based on my outline, totally neglecting all of the brain things that were telling me like, maybe this isn't working. Maybe this is, you know, but I was like, I can fix it in editing. It'll be fine. And then I ended up having to throw the whole draft away. 70,000 words, like gone. And like 5 months gone. And so now my deadline was cut in half and I had like nothing. So
wait. So tell us why you had to cut it. Why did you have to scrap the 70,000 word draft?
It just wasn't suspenseful. Like I had, you know, and my editor talked to me about this and she was right. I mean, it was really annoying to hear this. And I was like really mad for a few days. But she was right. I mean, it had just, I'm trying to remember. So it like basically started where it should have ended, I think was what it was. And it just wasn't, I mean, for a while I tried to make it salvageable. I was like, well, I could do this and that. And it wasn't working. So I threw it away. It sucked. And then, you know, when I threw it away was like April of 2020. So we had also just, you know, the pandemic had hit and my son was suddenly home all the time and I was home all the time and my husband was home all the time and we were like worried about this crazy disease. And so trying to be creative during that on it, like you can see it was not fun. But, you know, it's a better book now. It's a way better book than the other book that I had written. And, you know, because I actually rewrote the thing and now it's done and it's coming out, I could be like, oh, it's fine. But I have to tell you, I was really freaking out.
Yeah.
I was ready to like turn in my advance, like move to Hawaii, like take some job that has nothing to do with writing and just be done. So
yeah,
it was tough.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of others have been there too. Like you said, your friends warned you, but man, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So tell us, I mean, I could tell people, but I'd rather hear from you. Tell us what the book is about. In this particular one, obviously, The Mother Next Door has the word mother right in the title. So
it does.
Yeah. Perfect for this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. So so one of the things when I threw out the draft was I thought, you know, I'm going to write about what I love because this is the only way I'm going to get through revising this. And so my original draft, I had the book was always about this suburban neighborhood, like a very close-knit suburban neighborhood. I find suburbia a little creepy, and so I thought it was like a good place to set like a suspense novel. And but the original had been in the spring, and you know, I like love the fall, right? And I love Halloween. I was born on Halloween. It's my favorite time of year, and it's creepier. So I was like, well, I'm going to just change it. Like, I'm going to make it during Halloween, and I'm going to throw in an urban legend and a ghost and like all the stuff that I love. And that made it much easier to write. So the book is about this tight-knit group of moms, and they all have teenagers, and they all live on this cul-de-sac in this like kind of upper middle class neighborhood. And they throw a super famous annual block party every year for Halloween. And it's like the place like where all the kids want to go, right? Because they've got the coolest decorations and they've got music and they've got candy galore and all that stuff. So they throw this every year. And so the year that they're like this year when they're planning it, a new mom moves into the neighborhood with a teenage daughter. And so they're kind of bringing her into the fold. But at the same time that they're doing that, someone is suddenly like sending them threatening messages to expose this horrible thing that they have done in the past at another block party. And so they're trying to figure out who this person is, what they want, while also trying to keep up this facade of like the perfect life, the perfect neighborhood, the perfect party. And so, you know, I was really trying to play with this idea of the pressures that moms have to keep up this, like, I am doing everything and I am on top of it and I'm on ball, while underneath, you know, things could be crumbling. So I took that to a little bit of an extreme, but really that is like the pressures of a lot of moms, I think, you know, like it's like you kind of feel like you have to show that you are with it, right? And you're a great mom. And sometimes you don't feel that way, or at least I don't.
Not at all. No, I don't either. And there's that that trope, I guess, of like the messy mom, you know, the mom who like shows up at the bus stop and is like bedraggled in like pajamas and slippers, and that's supposedly a bad thing, I guess, even though like who is dressed at, you know, and like ready to go at 7:45 in the morning. But anyway, yeah, so there's that tension, I think, between being like perceived as a messy mom and wanting to be perceived as a woman who has it all together and like isn't a mom, but yet is also the perfect mom. Like, it's such a weird thing.
It is.
I think stories about mothers tend to be some of the most frightening stories, for so many reasons. But what do you think it is? And you just touched on this, and we're talking about it now. But let's go deeper into like why moms are particularly great characters for thrillers or for horror or for like suspenseful stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this like creepy tendency for parents to see their children as extensions of themselves. And in some ways that can manifest itself as like really competitive, right? And so you get these parents who, you know, want their kid to succeed. And you hear, you know, these extreme stories in the news about parents who will do anything for their child to get on the team or get into college or whatever it is. And then you hear the stories about these competitive mom groups where, you know, they're formed as a way to sort of bring moms together and talk about things. But there's so much judgment often about, you know, what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right, or I'm doing it right and you're doing it wrong. And so I think there's an interesting tension between wanting like a protective sort of, I'm defending you because you're a mom, I understand you, and at the same time, a fierce judgment. And I think that's really interesting. And so for my book, the moms in my book are not the best people. They do some pretty terrible things. But I think at their heart, they mean well in that there's this protective thing. They want to protect each other and this group that they've formed, and like this, there's a loyalty, I suppose, is what the word I'm looking for. They want to do what's best for their kids, what's best for their neighborhood and their community, and they want, you know, and for themselves, of course. And they make terrible decisions because of this. But again, I think there's this sense of like, we have to evoke a sense of perfection. And one of my characters in my book is really all about like wanting the perfect life. And she has purposefully planted herself in this neighborhood. She's always wanted to be there. She's always felt like if she could be there, that would be it. Like her life would be perfect. And she wants that for her and for her daughter. And she doesn't realize that in doing so, she's actually making bad mistakes in other areas. So
yeah Tell me about writing complicated, and I'm going to use quotes here because I don't like this word, but others use it, unlikable women characters, right? Like there's this sense that in fiction, women particularly ought to be likable, and or at least from readers, like a certain readers really get very upset if a woman is unlikable.
Agree.
Tell me about writing unlikable, well, complicated and flawed characters.
Yeah, I mean, I it makes me mad when people will judge a book based on like, oh, I didn't like this person. Because there are plenty of characters that I read that I don't like and wouldn't necessarily want to hang out with, but they're so interesting, right? If you can write them interesting, and if they have a code and they have like a system in their badness, then I don't know. To me, that's like so much more interesting. Like you can write really unlikable characters badly. You know, for example, very quickly on a tangent, I just watched the horror movie Malignant the other night.
I've been hearing about this everywhere. I haven't seen it.
Oh my God.
But you can go ahead. Like spoilers ahead if anyone wants to skip ahead like 2 seconds.
This is not a spoiler. It is just in the first like 5 minutes of the movie, you're introduced to the main character's husband, and he is the most, like, the biggest asshole, like, in a way that is so stereotypical and uninteresting. Like, he just says things just, it's like his dialogue is just in order to show everyone what a dick he is, basically.
Yeah.
It's not interesting, right? I mean,
No.
he's villain, and he's unlikable, but he's like super not interesting. And then you look at someone like, I'm going to use movies because
That's okay. Yeah.
like what's in my head right now. No Country for Old Men, the serial killer in that movie, or I guess, I don't know, is that a book? It's a book. Is it a book? I don't know. But anyway, I've seen the movie. He is the most interesting villain because he's got this like weird moral code and you're so interested in it. And even though he's a horrible person, I find him like super cool, like super interesting. So I think you can not like a character, but still like be really interested in them. Yeah. And I think that's the goal of a lot of writers who are writing these kind of characters. Is like, I don't want you to like this person. I want them to be interesting. So yeah. I don't know. Sometimes it's more fun to hang out with the bad ones anyway.
Yeah, totally. Do you think there's more leeway for flawed or bad male characters than there is for flawed or bad female characters? Like, I can think of so many anti-heroes who are men who everyone's like, yeah, like what's his name from Breaking Bad, or, you know, No Country for Old Men, like you said. And I have trouble thinking of comparable women characters, although there are some, definitely.
There are definitely some. And like Lane Fargo writes like horror and crime novels, and one of her books is about a female serial killer who I think works at a university, and she hosts a podcast called I think it's called Unlikable Women, because this is like a huge issue for her, and so there are definitely a ton of them. But you're right, I think people kind of gravitate towards male anti-heroes for whatever reason. I think it's changing though, because I think that it is like a conversation that's being had more. Yeah. That like, you know, it's like we're kind of rebelling against that notion, saying, no, women can be evil too. It's okay.
Yeah, and actually, not to like belabor this, but the ones I can think of are all beautiful. Like the evil women are also sexy. You know? Yeah. I can think of very few like normal looking women characters who people engage with, especially like on TV and in movies. I'm just trying to think of anyone. Probably the only one I can think of is what's her name from the Stephen King novel Misery. Yes, Kathy Bates in Misery. Yeah.
Yep. That's fun. And also his Dolores Claiborne too. The woman in that. But that's kind of sad, actually, that we can't think of any of ours. I bet if I had some time, I'd think about it. I'm going to email them.
Yeah. Okay. And everyone else, too, if you're listening and you can think of women anti-heroes who are not necessarily sexy, because those are the ones I think of, like, all about, no, what is it? With the woman, Sandra Oh, but the woman who's trying to kill her. Her name's Eve. I don't remember what the show is called. Chasing Eve? Killing Eve. Anyway, the beautiful and dangerous woman.
That women are like sexualized if they're like that. It's like almost excusable for them to be bad if they're hot.
Yeah, exactly. But men don't have that same issue. Anyway, we've been talking about this for a while, so let's go back to motherhood and writing. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question. So I tend to ask everyone this because I'm so interested in it. But did you always want to be a mother?
No.
No.
Mm-mm. No, for the longest time, I didn't think I would ever have kids. And I remember actually when I started dating my husband, I remember we walked into a department store, and we walked in, and like we were in the like kids section as we walked in, and there were like little outfits set out, and he was like, oh, you know, so I don't know, made some comment about it, and I was like, not happening, you know. And I honestly couldn't tell you really what changed for me. Like, I was always a little afraid of kids, especially like a lot of kids all together. I still am, honestly.
Me
It's kind of
too.
creepy.
Yeah. No, I am too.
I would
like
not
the
be able to be a
birds.
teacher. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Creepy. But there's something like really, I think the thing about kids is they say whatever the hell comes into their mind. And because there's no filter, it is actually a little frightening sometimes to be around them because they may expose something, some truth that you're either trying to hide or you're, not interested in talking about. And they have this way of honing in on that in super creepy and interesting ways. And it's a little frightening, especially when there's a ton of them. So I was a little afraid of them.
Yeah.
I like them now, don't worry. But even
No,
so,
I'm
like
with
if I
you.
go visit Dash's school or something, I am not that interested in being around a whole bunch of kids. You feel that way too?
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. I picked my daughter up at camp over the summer and she would come running, but then like with her would come running like 4 other girls she was playing with, and then they would surround me and they were pretending to be wolves. So they were howling and they were like this flock of 4.5-year-olds howling up at me. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And my husband, who's so much better with kids, was like, I'm a chicken, come chase me. Because they were looking for somebody to eat. And then he like led them off. I was like, oh.
Wow.
But it didn't occur to me to like what to do in that scenario. Yeah. So I agree.
It's
yeah.
scary.
It's
scary.
It is.
It's scary. And, I see like sometimes you post on Twitter, like things that your daughter says, and but that is like a wonderful thing about having a kid is the crazy things that they do say. Mm-hmm. And the humor, like when they start being funny, it is amazing. When they start making their own jokes, and Dash is super sarcastic right now. And I think he got it from, I have like a really dry sense of humor. And I love when he's sarcastic. It cracks me up. It's awesome.
Do you have an example? Like what's the last time he was sarcastic to you?
It's, it's so scenario based, but he'll just say something like really, like I'll say, I can't explain it because it's, when it's really good dry humor, it's just, but he'll just deadpan say something. And I just am like, wow, you are my child.
Yeah, and to see that it's like part of it's learned, but part of it is just instinctual, like their sense of humor, and what they find funny. And, But so what made you decide? So you were in the department store, you're like, hell no to the little people. What changed?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I just got older and, and got married, and we were like, we're boring together all the time for the rest of our lives. We need somebody here to entertain us. So no, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I can't tell you that there was some like light bulb moment day where I was like, I need to have children. It was just, I think, an evolving thing where I thought, actually, there was a moment when one of my friends that I adore, who I met when I studied abroad in England, I remember her telling me once when I told her I didn't want kids, I remember her saying to me, well, we have to have kids because we have to make little people who will then grow up to like carry on in the world in like good ways. Like we have to basically raise good people, because otherwise there's going to be people like raising kids that are not good people. And that like always stuck with me. I was like, okay, yeah, I can like, and obviously you have no control over what your child ends up growing into and being. And that's also a terrifying thing. But there is something nice about the idea of, being able to shape another person in some way, at least, or, try to. And one of the things about being a parent that I think is pretty cool is getting to be a kid again in some ways, right? You get to experience things that you loved again. You get to be silly in ways that you probably wouldn't otherwise. I love introducing him to movies that I loved as a kid, or books, like reading Harry Potter, like, sobbing while I was reading it. And he's like, Mom, you're so weird. But he loves it, and I love it, and it's like really cool to share those things with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just started. We had a long car ride, so we listened to Harry Potter. And my daughter, who's 5, like didn't quite get everything, but she was really into it, and she's asking questions. I was like, this is really fun, isn't it, to share things that you know that they'll love and watch them experience it for the first time.
Yeah, and get to experience it again through their eyes.
It's very cool. Yeah, absolutely. Did anything surprise you about becoming a mother?
I mean, doesn't everything surprise you in some ways? I was surprised at how much I loved being pregnant, because I thought that I was not going to love that, and I would be pregnant 10 times over spending the first 3 months with an infant. That was really hard. Being pregnant was like cake for me. I know a lot of women have terrible pregnancies, but I had a super easy pregnancy and I loved it. It was a very cool experience all around. But having that baby infant the first 3 months and not knowing what the hell you're doing, that was hard. That was hard. That was like moments of, I am never going to be able to do anything again, like any normal thing ever again.
Yeah. It does. It feels like it, doesn't it? In retrospect, it's fleeting, but boy, it seems to last forever when you're in the moment there, like up at 3 a.m. with a baby who just won't stop eating and pooping. And it's like, oh God, please go to sleep.
I mean, he was a relatively easy infant, but it's still really hard. And he was born December 23rd. So when he was that age, like that really infant age, it was winter. And so it was dark super early and cold, and it felt I feel bad for parents who have had children during the pandemic, because I felt very claustrophobic, and I can't imagine how it must feel to not actually be able to leave your house. Must have been very tough.
I agree. My best friend had a baby 3 months into the pandemic, I think, was when she, around the holidays. And she never got to go to a mother's group. She never got to meet any other moms in the neighborhood. Her child never got to really meet other babies or engage with them. And, they're fine. But I just remember how, like you said, claustrophobic and isolating it is. And it was a saving grace to me once a week to make myself go out down the street to the moms group. Yeah. And sit there and just be with other people and learn that what you were going through was what other women were going through too, and that you were all struggling together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, were you bringing her out to restaurants and stuff at an early age? Did you?
Yeah, I was.
We were very careful about that. We didn't want to be the parents who stayed in for the whole year, so we were, even though it was really hard, we kept bringing him places all the time, and we obviously wouldn't have been able to do that. So it's hard.
Oh yeah, no, we tried to do that too. I remember we often would have to leave, of course, because something would happen. But
exactly.
We would do that and take her, because we were in Boston at the time, so it was easy to just go to a museum or whatever. And I remember walking around with her in the thing, and she would fall asleep, and then she'd poop everywhere, and there was no changing room at the museum, and then you have to take them. It was hard, but I feel like it's worth it.
And you learn which bathrooms are the friendly ones.
Yeah. Totally.
And you learn to bring 7 different outfits.
7 outfits. I learned to carry a newspaper in case I had to put her down on the bathroom floor somewhere.
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yeah. So
that's a good one.
The newspaper, and then the changing pad, fold out pad, and then the baby. Yeah.
See,
anyway, strategies.
That tip. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me how. So as we established earlier, you've been writing through your son's whole life, and you've been publishing books. And I imagine that your strategy for writing has changed from like when he was really, really tiny to now where he's 9 and through a pandemic. And what are some of the things you learned? And I loved what you said earlier about sort of redefining writing for yourself and writing on your phone and, touching your work every day. What are some of the other things you've learned throughout these 9 years? And what would you tell women who are listening who have like babies versus 5-year-olds versus 9-year-olds?
Yeah. I'm obviously it's different for every person and their writing process and what they're trying to accomplish. But for me, I think the thing that I do now that helps me, because again, I think every woman who is a mom is going to be strapped for time, no matter if you work a full-time job or you're home or you have an infant or you have a 12-year-old, whatever. Like, we're all strapped for time. We never have enough time. And so it's helped for me to completely lie to myself. And when I say that, I mean, the way that I write novels these days is I tell myself that I have to write for 15 minutes, at least 4 days a week. And if I tell myself that, I can sit down because everybody can find 15 minutes. If I tell myself I have to write for an hour, I'm not going to do it. But if I say 15 minutes, you can do this, and I usually go over those 15 minutes. But if I lie to myself and say it only has to be 15 minutes, then I will sit down and do it. And there have definitely been days where it has been 15 minutes and I've been like looking at that clock like, oh God, I cannot do this. This is painful, but I do it. And then there have been days where I've written for an hour. But it helps because 4 times a week, it's a low bar entry. And even if I only write a couple hundred words, that's a couple hundred words that I didn't have before. And so that has been like a great trick of mine. The other thing that I have done that has helped me is to have a friend that I can check in with when I write and just tell them I wrote today. And I know that sounds weird, but like for me, writing is such a solitary thing that I feel like I need to tell people that I've like accomplished something. And so like, if I can write to somebody and just say, I'm done, I did it. And they write back and they're like, check. And this was I can't remember who the author was, but there was an essay a few years ago from an author who has this process. And she had a friend, and every day they would email each other, and their email would just be done. And then the person would write back and say, check. And it was like this check-in thing where that was it. Like, you didn't have to read the person's writing. You didn't have to workshop anything. You didn't even have to talk about what you did. It was just like, I just want to tell another human being that I have done this today. And it really helps because it feels like if you can't write it for that day, like if I can't say, hey, I did it, then I feel bad. Like I'm like letting them down or something. And so those two things have kind of helped me keep momentum. And they seem silly, but I don't know, they work for me in some way.
No, they don't seem silly at all. I think we all lie to ourselves about various things, right? Like, you also have to lie to yourself to some extent when writing, I think, in just saying, like, this is worth putting, like, this weird thing that I don't know what it quite is in my head, it's worth the ink or paper or computer space or whatever that it takes to put it down. And, like, make yourself believe that before anyone else will, right? So why not lie also about 15 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, nobody else is going to care if you do it or not. So you have to make yourself care about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too. The idea of being like, this is worth it. Because you have to believe it's worth it because there's a million other things that are calling your attention. A million other things. And so you have to believe that it's worth it. I like that.
Like, believe that it's worth it, but then also be willing to write badly. Like you said early on, right? It's this hard paradox. Yeah. It's like, this is a masterpiece, but it's also going to suck, at least for now. Like, it's hard.
Yeah. It's like you have to like believe that. I don't know. Honestly, like, it's so weird because I like I said, like with my second book, I believed like, oh, I can fix this. And then I couldn't fix it. So I don't know that that's going to help anybody listening because, but publishing is so weird and writing is so weird. And every single thing you do is totally different. Like I have heard from novelists who've written dozens of books and they're like, every single time, I don't know what I'm doing. That's terrifying because you'd think like, I got this now. I've written this many books. It's fine. But no.
Nope.
So,
I feel
we
like
keep doing it.
solidarity is important too, right? Like maybe it's not advice, but it's solidarity. It's like, yes, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, like that doesn't mean you're a bad writer or that there's something wrong with you. It just means that writing's hard.
Writing is hard and it's very weird.
It's very weird. Yeah. You know, I didn't ask you this in advance, so you feel free to say no, but would you like to read a little bit of your new book?
Oh.
Like just a couple pages, like 3 minutes worth?
I can read the opening prologue if you want.
Yeah, let's close this off with.
Let me see.
That's okay. Or
it's only 2 pages. I could do that.
Yeah, that's great. Give us a little taste. And I'm going to see if I can.
I haven't read this yet. So this is like the first time.
Okay. We're going to debut the book here with the first reading.
I mean, I've read it plenty of times, but I haven't read it
not out loud. I'm going to see if I can solo you here on the screen and then take it away. Here, let's see if this works. There we go. Yep.
Okay. So this is the prologue. Halloween. Ladies and gentlemen, skulls and boys, by the time our Halloween block party is over tonight, one of us will be dead. And I don't mean dead as in dull or dead as in zombified. I mean dead as in gone, dead as in expired, killed, murdered. You may be feeling distressed about this, knowing what you know about Ivy Woods, the great neighborhood it is, the sweet, loving families that live there. How could such a tragedy happen in such a wonderful place? You may have traveled here yourself as a child or as a parent, lured in by the local fame of the street and its ghoulish decorations each year. The lights, the smoke, the gravestones, and the moaning. The witches cackling and handing out candy. The swarms of little Frankensteins and cowboys and robots and ballet dancers lugging their pillowcases and plastic pumpkin buckets filled with sugar and junk. But Ivy Woods isn't perfect. Far from it. Look closer. Look under the makeup and the masks. Look into the windows of the perfect houses. Dig under the surface of those freshly mowed lawns and you'll find the worms. I've looked. Believe me, I've looked. There's something about this street. There are secrets. I know from watching through the windows, from hearing the hushed conversations, from lingering on their faces when they think everyone else has looked away. Oh, they think they are perfect. They pat themselves on the back for throwing such good parties, for raising such fine children, for living in such big houses. But they are pretending. They don masks on this one single night to dress up as someone or something else. But in reality, they live their lives this way. We all do. We hate ourselves. We are too fat or too thin. We should work hard, be smarter. We are lonely and depressed. We are worried about money. We are ashamed of the way that our friends and family treat us, but we lie about it all. We hide behind a protective facade, fragile glass figurines inside elaborate dollhouses, designed to look like perfect, safe, happy places. Tonight, it will all shatter. Watch closely and you'll begin to see what I see. There's trouble in the air, a cold wind blowing in from far away, and it's settled on Ivy Woods Drive. The secrets and the lies we tell ourselves and others will emerge tonight like spirits of the dead. Lines will be drawn. Sides will be taken. Someone won't make it out alive. I can't save that person, but I'll tell the story. Turn over the rocks, expose the worms, pull back the masks, because I know their secrets, secrets that will destroy them all. if they don't destroy themselves first.
Thank you, Tara. That was wonderful. And this book is terrifying and beautiful, and everyone should read it, but especially moms who feel the strain of trying to be perfect at all times, right? Which is probably
I dedicated the book to moms.
That's fabulous. So there you go. The least we can do is read it in return, right?
Yeah. So my dedication is for all the moms out there. You're doing a much better job than you think you are.
I love that. Tell us about your launch. Is it going to be in person or virtual? Where can people find you?
So I have a list of events on my website, and I'm doing a couple. Unfortunately, most of my events are going to be virtual because we are living in weird times. And I'm doing several events with my friend John Copenhaver, whose book is coming out this Tuesday. It's great. It's called The Savage Kind, and it is a historical noir. It's wonderful. And so we're doing a couple of events, including Politics and Prose on October 16th. Great. And we're going to be talking about fear. So that'll be fun.
That'll be awesome. And we'll put the link on social, and be sure to be there to support you. And thank you again for joining me. This has just been such a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was really fun. I hope we can meet in person someday.
Me too. Hopefully when things are back in person.
I know.
So Tara, stick around for a second afterwards so I can say goodbye. Okay. But thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Bye. And thank you all for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please consider becoming a patron or patroness of Writer Mother Monster. And you can pre-order your copy of The Mother Next Door, which comes out in less than 2 weeks now. Check out Tara's website, which we will post on social for her event schedule. And please join her at Politics and Prose in October. And see you all next week. Have a great night.